Thanks everyone for being here. I'm going to be talking today about a large and continuous population of eastern chimpanzees that inhabits the forest and savanna woodlands of northern DRC. Chimpanzees are in drastic decline in many areas of their range. In some areas, nest encounter rates are down 90% over the past 20 years. It's a crisis situation, basically, for one of our closest living relatives. Some of the threats to the species include agriculture, logging, mining, bushmeat trade, and disease. Up-to-date data are crucial to guide our conservation efforts. DR Congo is actually a top priority because it's thought that it's home to about half of the world's remaining chimpanzees. And much of the potential chimpanzee habitat in DR Congo remains intact. What we don't know is, where are the chimpanzees? About 20 years ago, Butinsky published a very useful publication in Africa's Great Apes, describing numbers of chimpanzees in different countries in Africa. There appeared to be, in this publication, a gap in Northern DRC, although overall, DRC was highlighted as holding potentially almost half of the number of chimpanzees in the world, up to 110,000 individuals. This gap was puzzling. As you can see, just at the border of Central African Republic and DR Congo, there was a large gap going south where it seems to claim that there are no chimpanzees found there. Although there's a small area where chimpanzees were known to occur, which was around the area of Bili, which we'll be talking about soon. Was this gap real or illusory? Well, in addition, in 2012, Juncker et al. Modeled potential chimpanzee habitat and basically places where chimpanzees might likely be found to occur based on a number of factors. And actually, I contributed some of the data you'll see in a minute to this study, but it still basically showed that Bili was an unlikely area, that Northern DRC was an unlikely area to hold a large population of chimpanzees. So again, at first glance, it might be thought this is not a very good place to invest in if we're looking to protect chimpanzees. But is this actually the case? Well, for that, in order to test basically Butinsky's claim and to see, is this really an area that is seeming to lack chimpanzees? We actually conducted about a 10-year survey of an enormous region up to about 50,000 square kilometers in northern DRC, just along the border with Central African Republic. This area had within it two protected areas: the Rubitele area to the south, which the borders, as you can see, have been somewhat disputed, and the Bili-Uere domain de chasse, which is an enormous protected area, but it's protected at a very low level. So over 10 years, we walked forest walks in this region looking for evidence of chimpanzees. Now, I should actually mention we started the region in Bili, which is north of the Uele River here on the map. You can see it here, kind of halfway between the Uele River and Central African Republic border. Later, we expanded the survey to a much larger area. You can see, actually, something I want to point out is to the south of the Uele River here, the river in the middle, you see a lot of just intact tropical moist forest and that's represented by dark green. Lighter areas show where humans have been at work, clearing forest and planting agriculture, and purple shows savanna-associated habitat. You can see to the north of the Uele River, there's a lot of savanna-associated habitat, which may be why it was not earmarked as a good area for chimpanzees. We started around the town of Bili, and we found some really remote and pristine forests. We found basically a forest savanna mosaic rich in primates and other mammals. You can see we put out camera traps and encountered actually a mix of forest and savanna-associated species. Also included hyenas, lions are found there. Just a very rich biological treasure there in the Bili area, and lots of chimpanzees. So how do we conduct these surveys? Well, basically, first of all, across the 50,000 square kilometer area, we conducted hundreds of kilometers of forest walks. These were recce's. They're non-systematic and usually carried out while actively looking for chimpanzees. And as you can see, we found lots of chimpanzee nests, which was the main focus of our counts. And we can compare the results of these within this study, but not with recce's at other sites, just because of possible methodological differences. Again, we were actively looking for chimpanzees during these recce's. But we also conducted a more systematic transect study in 2005, where we cut approximately 355-kilometer parallel transects in the Bili-Uere region. We left certain regions of it uncut so that hunters wouldn't follow us into the forest. And based on nest counts of chimpanzees, we estimated their density using a distance formula. We actually left out ground nests, which is an interesting behavior of these chimpanzees, which up to 28% of all nests in some regions, which means our estimates here for numbers of chimps are going to be underestimates. And in 2012, we returned to the same region of Bili and rewalked 26 kilometers of transects on a northern transect, and then compared them using a GLM, generalized linear model in R. And if you want more information on the details of our statistical analyses, I'll be happy to answer them in the questions section. You can see here in the north, basically the yellow here shows where we walked forest walks. Most of them are Recce's. It's across a 50,000 square kilometer region on both sides of the Bili-Uere River. Keep in mind, this area was thought to not have high densities of chimpanzees or possibly lack chimpanzees, except for the town of Bili, the area around the town of Bili. And the transects were actually located in the Bili area. Now, what did we find? Well, here are the 3 parallel transects we cut, moving away from the road between Bili and other villages, and into crossing savanna and into the Gangu forest, which was a really remote and untouched forest at that time, which was where we're finding a lot of the megafauna. And as you can see, the red dots are actually nest groups, and we found many more nest groups in the Gangu area than we did closer to the road, although chimpanzees were found throughout the region. And what do we find? Well, you can see here you can ask me about the details in the talks afterwards. We found an estimated number of overall about 300 to 1,000 chimpanzees. There's a wide range there in our estimation because we don't know nest decay rates for this region. Overall, there's between 300 and about 1,000 chimpanzees, and you can see the densities and the potential numbers are much higher in the Gangu forest than they are in Camp Louis forest, quite a bit higher. So there were estimated more chimpanzees in Gangu than Camp Louis, which makes sense given Gangu was further from the road. But we're talking about 300 to 1,000 chimpanzees here that basically had been uncounted before. And the most exciting thing here is in both forest regions, we actually compared the encounter rates of chimpanzee nests between when we were there in 2005 and when we came back in 2012, despite an invasion of gold miners that happened in the middle of this period, which led to lots of elephants being slaughtered, and we found their bones. Chimpanzees, actually, the great news is the numbers hadn't really changed. In fact, we found more nests in both Gangu and Camp Louis, and overall, in 2012 and 2005, but not significantly more. So it looks like the chimpanzees had stayed stable over that entire period. Now, for those who are watching what's happened to chimpanzees elsewhere in Africa, that's actually a real anomaly because in most areas, chimpanzees are they're in a drastic decline. So this is really good news for conservation. This basically just shows both tree nest encounter rate and estimated chimpanzee densities, comparing between an average taken of East African sites, 15 and 31 for the density estimations and 15 for the nest site encounter rates. And you can see our numbers compare favorably to the East African sites in gray on the right there. So these are not low densities of chimpanzees, as you might expect, because it's in woodland. A lot of the habitat is woodland. These are actually quite comparable to other sites across East Africa. Now, in the Recce walks, which were over a much more extensive area, so not just Bili, but also in multiple sites across this 50,000 square kilometer area on both sides of the Bili-Uere River, this is where we found positive evidence of chimpanzees in this study. So just about everywhere we looked, and granted, we were looking for them. We would ask villagers where they'd heard chimps and go there. Nevertheless, I think this is strong evidence that this is an interconnected chimpanzee population, not yet broken up into island fragments as in other areas in Africa. There's a couple of sightings of chimpanzee nests from other studies put on this map as well. So really good news. This is a continuous population, I think the evidence shows. Here's another way of looking at that. You can see the yellow is where we walked, the red is where we found nests. And there's even a few other places that we found nests later on, like Bambilo, that are not on this particular map. So Recce is conducted in the South Welly Forest, so south of the Welly River, where actually the human impact is much higher, I should mention. And there's a lot more artisanal mining and bushmeat trade. We followed the same methodology as Recce's walk to the north, and we found 3.4 times higher encounter rates of chimp nests to the south than the north. Now it's kind of hard because our methodologies may have differed between the two regions. There was no savanna to the south, but this suggests that chimpanzees are probably at least as abundant in the South Welly forest that we surveyed as they are in the forest savanna mosaic to the north. So chimpanzee nests were found at probably roughly the similar rates across the entire region we surveyed. Nests were also found within less than 20 kilometers from all major settlements, even within 12 kilometers of a large population center called Buta, where the bushmeat trade is heavily underway. Another exciting thing about the results, we studied chimpanzee artifacts. And chimpanzee artifacts can be grouped into some major patterns, including the chimpanzees have entered the Stone Age in West Africa. They use stone tools to crack open nuts there. In Central Africa, they use honey clubs to pound open honey in trees, termite brushes. It was a special kind of termite tool that's found in the area in the green there, and tool sets. Honey dig is found across a large area of Central Africa. In Uganda, northern Uganda, chimpanzees use few or no sticks in their toolkits. And then I want to add what we found here is the Bili-Uere behavioral realm, and we wrote a whole paper on that in 2019. And this is a very special group of behaviors of these chimpanzees. One item that these chimpanzees all across Northern DRC use, possibly all the way to the border with Uganda, is frequent ground nesting. Ground nesting is usually more of a gorilla behavior, but in this case, chimpanzees are sleeping a lot on the ground. We're currently conducting a big study on that. We also found a tool kit of up to 5 tool types in Northern DRC. And here's some of the tools laid out. You can read more about them and the different kinds of tools. You can see them here. Those are the different uses that the tools are put to in the 2019 paper. It says impress here, but it's actually 2019. Unfortunately, this chimpanzee population is under severe threat. In Bili, north of the Welly River, surprisingly, we found not so much. We only found a couple of carcasses or orphans over the entire period we were there, a 1.5-year period in the Bili area north of the Welly River. But you can see on these maps here, south of the Welly River, we found much higher encounter rates of chimpanzee orphans and carcasses. In fact, it was actually somewhat terrifying to think of how many chimps were being lost. This is a montage of images of some of the orphans that we found for sale along the roads and markets. And what's different between the south of the Welly and the north is south of the Welly, there is a lot of artisanal mining and roads being cut into formerly pristine forests. So we're witnessing the beginning of a chimpanzee massacre. Hasn't spread to Bili, at least by the time I was there in 2016, but that could be changing. Due to the instability and political instability and remoteness, recent settlement efforts at Gangu have failed. You can see these are some efforts of people to cut fields into the Gangu forest, which previously had been remote. We took this picture in 2012, but they failed. But there are worrying signs that things may be changing. This is a FRDC soldier with a chimpanzee orphan in the town of Bili in 2012, and this is some chimpanzee bushmeat that was found in the Gangu forest in 2011. So we can't be complacent. And elephants were slaughtered between 2005 and 2012. Fortunately, due to our work, we now have ICCN presence and African Wildlife Foundation. They have an active presence in these forests and are working hard to protect all the species there. But again, we can't be complacent. We really need to focus on this area in addition to all the other areas because there's a lot of chimpanzees left up there. It may represent the largest continuous population on the planet. In conclusion, the Northern DR Congo is home to an important and probably continuous population of eastern chimpanzees. If we assume that our Bili encounter rates are representative of the entire area, then it would be home to thousands of chimpanzees that were not put in the totals before. Why did the model and Juncker et al. Suggest the region was poorly suited for chimpanzees? Well, it could be previous bias to surveying areas far from settlements, or maybe the model she used failed to take into account chimpanzee presence in savannas. The Bili-Gangu core region of the Bili-Uere Protected Area Complex should be of the highest conservation priority. The chimpanzee population in Bili-Gangu core zone appears to have remained stable over the last decade. And again, we must support the efforts of the ICCN and AWF to safeguard the area. Thanks. This was a multinational and multi-group collaboration. Thanks to everyone involved. And again, look forward to answering some of your questions and continuing this further in the discussion. Okay, that's it.